taking your daughter to childcare on your way to work. She's telling you about all the fun she had yesterday learning about how pumpkins grow. She shows you the paper craft she made that she left in the car seat yesterday. She's really proud of it. She tells you that she hopes Miss Mary will teach her about how other things grow, like her favorite flowers. She hugs you as you drop her off at the door, then goes inside to play with her friends. You hope on your way to work you tell yourself that you're very excited and thankful that you found such a good home daycare for your daughter. Right now, probably nobody's thinking about the type of childcare they'll need someday, but the future does come quicker than we think. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the differences between home daycare and daycare centers and why home daycares are better for children. My information comes from the Indiana Family and Social Services Administration. I also looked at a study about child care done by Janet Erickson, who was a former assistant professor at BYU. So I'd like to begin by explaining what home daycare is. A home daycare is a child care business run out of a person's home. So the people who run them have made a conscious decision to do this as their career. So they've set up their house similar to a daycare center. They usually have areas where children can take naps, play areas, maybe a toy room, things like that. Most states require a license, and if you're found that you're an unlicensed home daycare provider, then you can be penalized, you can be shut down and fined. So in Indiana, the licensing takes a while to get your license. There is an extensive background check. You have to have a high school diploma, and within 3 years of opening, you have to receive your Child Development Associative credential, showing you that you know how to take care of children. You also have to attend safe sleep training classes and become certified in pediatric CPR and first aid. And you also have to attend an orientation training on how to run your business. You have to undergo annual inspections where they see how you prepare food for the children. They make sure that your house is safe enough and that you're up to date on the fire codes, things like that. You also are required to have a policy on how you're going to meet the developmental and educational needs of the children in your care, and then you have to provide the policy to your parents as well. There's a limit on how many children can be cared for by a staff member, so that depends on the age of the child. So in Indiana, 4 infants must be cared by at least 1 adult. If you have more than 4 infants in your care, then you have to have an assistant, but the ratio depends on the age of the child. So I said that they must provide developmental programs. This is an example of what a schedule might look like at a home daycare where they're primarily toddlers. They have craft time, story time, educational games, things like that. They might go to the park to learn about nature. In these pictures, they have set their homes up to sort of teach them the alphabet, letters, things that you would learn in a preschool setting. So now that you know a little bit about what a home daycare is, I'd like to tell you why it is more beneficial for children than daycare centers. So a really important milestone in a child's life is developing relationships and learning how to build strong bonds with people. So in the first few years of a child's life is when they form those bonds of trust. So it's very important that they have a caring person in charge of them, giving them care that they can form this relationship with. So in daycare centers, there are a lot of children, and it's harder for the staff to give each child the attention that they need because there are so many of them. In a home daycare, the child-staff ratio ensures that each child receives attention that they need, and there's usually about 3 to 12 kids per home daycare, so it's a very small setting, so the care providers can form those essential relationships with the children. Some of them do hire assistant caregivers. They have to undergo the background checks and all the same requirements that the daycare provider had to get the license in their home. The educational plans help the children's brain develop, so they read to them. They might have discovery tables where if they're teaching a theme for the week, like maybe on dinosaurs, they would have a table set up with books about dinosaurs and maybe toys and activities for them to do so they can learn more about that. Another major development during the early years is peer interaction. So they need to be communicating with children their age as well as children of other ages as well. They need to do this so they can develop language skills, learn how to share, improve their communication. In a daycare center, this is hard for children to do because they split up by ages of the child. So they would have like an infant class, a 2-year-old class, split it up by age. So the different ages of children aren't able to interact as well with each other. Home daycares are better because there is a limit on the amount of children in the home, but there's not a limit on the age of the child. So there's usually a mix of preschool age children with babies, with toddlers, and so by communicating with the different age levels, their skills, their language skills, their relational social skills are improving as well. Environment is very important in a young child's life as well. So daycare centers are more institutionalized. They're sometimes more impersonal, where everything is set up a certain way and it has to stay that way always, where a home daycare is more, it gives a more relaxed feel. The children are already used to being cared for in a home, so it's an easier transition for them to be away from their parents in a home setting rather than a daycare center that they're unfamiliar with. Daycare or home daycares also have their backyard set up to take care of the children as well. So for these reasons, I believe that home daycares are better for children than daycare centers. I've described to you what a daycare is, what a home daycare is, and the differences between home daycares and daycare centers. And I'd like to conclude by saying that I personally believe home childcare is more nurturing than daycare centers. And I think that if parents review their options before they put their child in daycare, they will find that home daycare is the most beneficial.
Okay, so on the left is my 3-year-old nephew Jackson, and on the right is my 3-year-old niece Chloe. They were born only 6 weeks apart, and because they're the same age, they share many similar interests. But one difference does remain between them. Jackson has always been far more advanced in his speech than Chloe. Now, they were both raised under similar values and beliefs because obviously my siblings were raised that way. But one simple point, differences between them it's difficult to ignore. Jackson, he doesn't watch more than 2 hours of TV a day, but when he is allowed to watch it, he watches whatever he wants. And Chloe rarely ever watches TV, and when she does, it's only things that will teach her her alphabet and her numbers, and things that will just expand her vocabulary. So even though this possibility might seem really far off to you guys right now, most of us will have a family of our own one day. And if you can imagine, when you do have children, you'll always want to make sure that you're exposing them to the right things. So I'm here to encourage you that when you do have children one day, that when you think about the concept of television, you allow it to just simply be a form of entertainment instead of trying to make it something more than that, something that can be an enemy to their development. So some of my information comes from personal experience, since I have watched these two grow over the last 3 years. I also got some more medical information off of kidshealth.org and Psychology Today. So today, I will be explaining society's complaints against television, the positive effects of television watching, and how this information can be applied to the daily lives of the future generation. So first I'm going to explain some of the arguments that have been made against television in the past. There are plenty of studies out there done by different psychologists that say television watching for younger children causes a hindrance in the brain development, and then in older children it causes them to lack physical activity in their daily lives, and it's also linked to lower test scores and lower grades. Some studies that I looked at have even gone so far as to say that certain shows will cause autism in your children, and one of these is SpongeBob. And so one thing that I really want to reiterate here is Jackson has always been very advanced in his speech. Chloe has shown signs of mild autism. Jackson has watched SpongeBob since he was born. Chloe has never watched SpongeBob. I'm not trying to suggest that SpongeBob is like this miraculous cure for everything that can solve the world's problems, but I do think it's an example that shows that some of these tests really don't have much merit to them. Some psychologists have even said that there's really no real proof that we can come up with that says that television hinders a baby's development, but that lack of social interaction does. So it's more the fact that television can be a tool to keep children from interacting with other people than it is that television is the problem itself. So now I'm going to show some of the positive effects that children experience from watching television shows. So of course there are a number of shows out there that are very educational, that are good for children. But I want to advocate that sometimes these shows that are meant more for entertainment can be more beneficial and teach them more important things. So one of these shows that I know really well is Sophia the First. If you have younger girls in your life, you've probably seen this show because it's very popular. This show doesn't function a lot like other cartoons. It's not one of those like Dora where it stops and says, what color is that? What shape is that? But it's very plot driven. And by the end of each episode, at least one of the characters has gone through some sort of moral change. Chloe's favorite show is Sophia the First, and she's actually learned a lot more from watching this show than she has from watching any other show that does teach numbers in the alphabet, just because she enjoys this more. So one thing that I've noticed from her watching this show that she's benefited from is she's been able to memorize people's names a lot faster because she can quickly pick up on names in this show. So when you introduce her to somebody now, she'll remember their names a lot faster. There's also a lot of songs in this show, and there have been a lot of speech therapists who say that children who have a hindrance in their speech development, they learn a lot better if you teach them in song, because it helps them to articulate their words, and it's just easier to memorize, and that's something that I've really seen in Chloe. These shows can also teach children to be more culturally aware. Typically, these shows suggest more diversity. In this one, there are a lot of different cultures represented, and I think it can teach children, like, hey, this is not the only culture there is. I'm not the only type of person in the world. And I think most importantly, it teaches children more about moral issues than it does educational issues. Now, it is important for children to know their shapes and colors and their numbers and their alphabet, but I feel like that's something that not many people can fail at teaching their children. They will eventually learn those things, whether when they go to preschool, when they hear other children talking about it. But things like morality, we often fail at teaching younger children how to be positive people in the world. And I'm not saying, again, that television is the cure to that, but I think instead of making it an enemy, we could make it a tool to help us in raising our children to be moral. So lastly, I'm going to illustrate how we can apply this information to our future families. So of course, you don't want to park children in front of a TV all day. I'm not advocating for that. KidsHealth.org recommends no more than 2 hours a day. And if we're really worried about their social interaction, I would say you can sit down and watch with the children and ask them questions. And you don't have to sit there and say, like, oh, what color is her dress? Or what shape is her hat? But you can sit there and ask things like, so what did she learn from that experience? Well, not in those words, but you get what I'm trying to say. And of course, we do want to monitor what they're watching morally. You don't want 4 and 5-year-olds watching MTV, but you do, I think there's a benefit to letting them choose the type of cartoons they want to watch and letting them learn from those things. And I'd also say, like, if you just let them have fun and be immersed in the worlds of their favorite shows, they will learn a lot from just expanding their imaginations. I know Jackson loves Ninja Turtles, he loves pretending to be a Ninja Turtle. He loves beating me up pretending to be a Ninja Turtle. Chloe loves little Einsteins, and she doesn't like sit there and recite the shape. She sits there and pretends like she's flying the spaceship and singing the theme song. So if we just let them expand their imaginations, they'll learn a lot better that way. So again, I'm not suggesting that children benefit from sitting in front of television screen all day long. In fact, in my personal experience, both my nephew and my niece have learned far more from interacting with me and my siblings and my parents than they have from any television show they've ever been exposed to. But I'm only suggesting that television may not be as harmful as we've been taught, and it could actually benefit our future generations in ways that maybe we never thought possible. So I encourage you to take this information and at least consider the possibility that this could be beneficial to your futures with your families.
Alright, so in the country of the USA, there are 80% of people that experience stress in their lives. Only 37.5% of those people find ways to manage that stress in some way. A lot of us suffer from too much stress in our lives. Either it's school, job, relationships. To help unwind, we either look to go to movies on a Saturday night or video games in our free time. But there is another option, and this option is the sport of fishing. We have to help unwind our bodies and minds so that we can cope with life when we have stress. Some of my information comes from my experiences in my life. I've been fishing since I was a little kid, since I was 5 or 6 years old, and I continue to this day. I went yesterday. I went to the St. Joe River in Michigan yesterday on a whole day trip, so it was a lot of fun. But I'll talk about that later. Some of my information comes from the Huffington Post, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and TakeMeFishing.org. Today I will explain how fishing provides mental and physical benefits, and also I'm going to explain some of my experiences with fishing. Mental benefits. Fishing provides many mental benefits in our lives. First thing I want to talk about is it promotes critical thinking and creativity. When we decide to go fishing, first we have to look at what bait we're going to use. This bait can be many different colors, can be many different sizes. If for example, if we're going to go after large fish species like the northern pike, we're going to be looking at a much bigger bait than a lure that is smaller if we're going for like bluegill. So we can be really creative when we decide to go fishing. And also the location. For example, Lake Wawasee is the biggest lake in Indiana. It's 3 miles long by 1 mile wide. And there's just so much area on that lake that you can fish. We can be creative and fish many different depths in that lake as well. So critical thinking and creativity is really huge in helping us cope with our stress. There was a study done with veterans that came back from Iraq, and they found out that after a 3-day-long trip of fishing, there was a 32% reduction of guilt, 43% decrease of hostility, and fear was also reduced by 30%. Now you know the mental benefits of fishing, let's turn to the physical benefits of fishing. So the first thing I want to talk about is wading. So the first thing I want to talk about is wading. Wading is basically just putting waders on and just in the creek. This was on Saturday. Me and my dad were out catching minnows so that we could go fishing on Sunday, like I said before. But when we wade in the water, the current pushing against us will allow us to have basically a total workout of the legs and also in the core area. When we walk in a stream, there's a lot of rocks, logs in the river. And when we step on those, it kind of affects our balance, so we use our core to keep our balance. Next thing is hiking. When there is a lake or a fishing spot that we can't get to by either vehicle or boat, you have to walk there, and that takes a lot of work to do. Casting and reeling. When we cast, we use small muscles in our fingers and hands that we don't use in a gym workout, a normal workout. We burn 500 to 1,500 calories in an hour of fishing, and also an average person that burns 250 calories in a gym workout, that's twice as much or quadruple the amount of what we do in fishing. So now you know both the mental and physical benefits. I'm going to talk about my experience of fishing and why it has changed my life for the good. Like I said before, fishing has been a huge part of my life. I started fishing when I was 5 or 6 years old, and I continue to do that to this day. But one thing I really love about fishing is it brings family and friends together. It brings family and friends together. Like, there's some people in my life that I don't really get to see as often, but when we go fishing, we come together, and that is basically the only time or the only thing that we have in common. A great example of this is my Uncle Tim. We took him fishing yesterday, and the only time I really get to see him is when we go fishing. That's basically the only thing we have in common. So it's really good just to be with him, even if we don't catch any fish. Just a good time on the water and spend time with him. In my life, I've definitely seen fishing has reduced my stress. If I have a long week of work or school, and I just decide to go fishing just to get rid of all that bad stuff, I can definitely see a change in my attitude towards others and also in my life. Fish is also a really great nutrition for our bodies. It contains omega-3 fatty acids, and it also lowers blood pressure and the risk of stroke. There was a study done with the Japanese diet, which consists of fish and veggies, and the study was basically showing how people lived a longer life. Women lived to 87 years and men lived to 80 years, which is like close to like 10 to 15 more years than what we live for an average year, for an average lifespan. And the last thing I want to talk about is just the memories of my life. This was yesterday. We caught 14 keeper walleyes, and this was the biggest one we caught. It was like 26, 27 inches. But just the pictures that we take after our fishing trips is just something really great to look back on. And this day I'll never forget for the rest of my life. But this picture will always remind me the day that we had on the water. And it's really great to have those sort of memories. I'm really grateful to have this sport of fishing in my life, this hobby that helps me cope with stress and other things in my life. So to sum this up, I have examined the mental benefits, physical benefits, and my experiences with fishing. The great thing about fishing is anyone can participate in the sport. Whether you're young, you're old, male or female, you can fish. We all have the ability to. The U.S. has over 3.5 million miles of rivers in the U.S. That's 140 times around the earth, and 35,000 public ramps in the U.S. So it's easy to find a place to fish here in the U.S. and God has allowed us to the chance to use these lakes and bodies of water for our benefit. And He realizes that we have stress in our lives and we have bad things that happen. And one way to get closer to Him is to go out and spend time in the woods or on a lake. Because when we're on a lake or in the woods, we're thinking about His creation. We're thinking about the trees. We're thinking about the fish or whatever, the water. We're thinking about Him. And I just challenge you guys to grab a reel, and you might I challenge you to grab a rod, and you might just reel in a better life.
First, her mother passed away. Then when Rose Toloin was 8 years old, the government came and took her father away. She never saw him again. One day soon after, soldiers arrived at her door, instructing her siblings, and her grandfather to pack what little possessions they could carry and meet the rest of their community in the city square. When they got there, the soldiers ordered them to begin marching. Unable to keep up with the harsh pace, her grandfather was left on the side of the road to die. She and her siblings were in the midst of the Armenian genocide. The Armenian genocide officially began in April of 1915 when the Turkish government initiated the systematic killing of Armenians living within their country. They were afraid to join World War I with a significant Christian population within their borders because the Ottoman government was a radical Muslim organization. The roads Armenians trod during the death marches were littered with dead, emaciated bodies. On the march, rape was common, shootings regular, and looting's the new norm. When the killings ceased in 1916, the number of victims ranged between 400,000 or 600,000 and 1,400,000 Armenians. Even though first-person accounts like Rose's exist, Turkey denies the genocide even occurred. In addition, the United States government has never publicly acknowledged that the genocide happened either. Why? When so much evidence exists to the contrary, does our government and the Turkish government refuse to acknowledge that the event even happened? And why is this seemingly minor historical fact relevant for our lives today? As a descendant of Armenian genocide survivors myself, I have grown up hearing stories of how my family and my friends' families escaped the killings. I also interviewed my grandfather, whose parents emigrated from Turkey because of the genocide. Last spring, I talked to Gökhan Özal, a Turkish American who appeared before the Michigan legislature against the genocide being taught in public schools. Finally, I have collected research from a variety of sources such as the United Human Rights Council and various books about the genocide. Today, I want to explain how Turkey denies the genocide, why this is a problem, and what we as Christ followers can do to prevent injustice like this in the future. The first reason Turkey gives for denying the genocide is that the Armenians allied with Russia, their enemy in World War I. However, when you look at the facts, you see that this story is not completely true. Yes, a small minority of Armenians did join the Russian coalition, but out of that small minority, many of them joined because they were already being killed by the Turkish people and they had no weapons. It was more out of self-defense than radical nationalism. And even if Armenians did join the Russians, sending innocent women, children, and the elderly on death marches simply does not fit the perceived crime. A second reason Turkey gives against the genocide is that they did not intend to kill Armenians because those in the western part of the country remained relatively unharmed. However, we have to also consider who else was living in the western part of the country. Turkey was at war, and she needed her allies to help protect their borders. But they couldn't anger these allies either, so parading mass killings of innocent women, children, and elderly before their German allies simply wouldn't have been a good move. Finally, the Turkish argue that since the word genocide wasn't coined until the 1940s, it cannot apply to the events that happened in their country in the 1910s. However, when you look at the etymology of this word, you see that this argument doesn't hold out either. Raphael Lemkin coined the word genocide as a way to refer to the mass killings occurring in Europe at the turn of the 1900s. What was his number one example for the new word? The Armenian genocide. And even still, just because a word didn't exist when an event happened, doesn't mean that you can't use that word to apply to that situation. The logic simply does not add up. So why is it a problem that Turkey and the U.S. continue to deny that the genocide happened? Well, first, it opens the door for future atrocities. Just 20 years later, in 1939, Hitler wrote this letter. I have sent to the east only my death head units with the orders to kill without pity men, women, and children of the Polish race and language. Who speaks nowadays of the Armenians? Maybe if somebody would have spoken up in the 1910s, 6 million Jews wouldn't have died in the 1940s. A second reason this is a problem is it shows that as Americans, we place economics before the value of human life. Originally, the U.S. agreed to deny the genocide because we needed Turkey's oil after World War I. There was a shortage. However, we continue to suppress the story because, yes, we still need that oil, but also we need Turkey as an ally in the Middle East. Finally, this continues to be a problem because it limits free speech in America. Whenever Hollywood tries to make a movie sharing the story of the Armenian genocide, somehow Turkey always slows the project down. We're allowing Turkish propaganda to determine what we say in America, the land of the free. Even though it is sad, America refuses to acknowledge the genocide, what can regular people like us do anyway? Well, first, we can share this story. Turkey does not want the story of the genocide to get out. But when we share the story, we can start making steps toward justice for the victims. Second, we can pray for refugees. Currently in the Middle East, there is a similar scenario to the one that happened 100 years ago. When we pray for the refugees, we can make a difference. Finally, we have to value the lives of those around us. One of the first steps toward genocide is always dehumanization. But when we, as Christ followers, see people through God's eyes as image bearers of Him, we can prevent injustice from happening again. Today, I have explained why Turkey continues to deny the genocide, why this matters in our world today, and what we as Christians can do to prevent injustices like this in the future. What I have not shared with you yet is the end of Rose's story. Eventually, a Turkish officer spotted her sister and promised that in exchange for marrying him, he would protect her and her siblings. Her sister agreed, but the family escaped from that marriage as soon as they could. Rose spent the rest of her childhood as a refugee in Lebanon and Cuban humanitarian camps. That is, until she met Casper, a man who promised to be her ticket to America if she married him the next day. She agreed, moved to Chicago, and began a family. Her youngest son was my grandfather. Even though the Ottoman Empire changed our lives forever, we have chosen to forgive Turkey even though they deny wrongdoing. We simply wish to share our story so similar atrocities never happen again.